You just hit play on TechVibe Pittsburgh, your front row seat to Pittsburgh's technology and innovation ecosystem. I'm your host, Jonathan Kirsting with the Pittsburgh Technology Council, where for nearly 30 years, I have been telling the stories of Pittsburgh's technology companies, the men and women behind them, and so much more. So in today's fast-paced digital world, secure and efficient file transfer solutions are just more critical than ever. And today, we are going to nerd out on a Pittsburgh startup, Secure Transmit, that has a cutting-edge file transmission service designed to address the intricacies of modern data sharing. And this service is really cool because it is the brainchild of two unlikely collaborators. Angel Foglia, who is a seasoned IT professional, and Joe Fridy, a software engineer with a complete knack for innovation. So you got to keep on listening if you want to learn about the near 30-year journey of taking this technology from the corporate office right to the marketplace. It's got some twists and some turns, but it is totally fun. So let's jump in with Angel and Joe right now. I totally enjoy having these conversations with people that are starting stuff, building stuff, creating solutions for things out there. We always love starting with introductions so our listeners get to know who's who and what's what. And Angel, let's start with you. What's your background and why the heck did you decide to be part of this cool thing around Secure Transmit?
Okay, my background is I'm an IT person at heart, and my career was in information technology. And I started this Secure Transmit. It was purely luck, and because I met Joe in the corporate environment where I was, and together we saw this unique opportunity, and so we took advantage of it and created Secure Transmit together.
All right. So Joe, you guys are working together. So I take it you got some IT chops as well too.
Not exactly.
Okay.
I am a recycled engineer, and I spent my career writing scientific software. But in the middle of my career, we had a problem where we needed to manage our ad hoc sorts of communications
Gotcha.
with academics and miscellaneous people outside of the technical environment where I was working. And we had a kind of a hole in our infrastructure that didn't allow us to do that easily. And so I wrote a file transfer utility that would allow us to keep our sensitive data inside our firewall and still allow us to communicate with our contacts outside. And I spent a little while sparring with the security and IT people.
I can imagine you're like
Eventually-
ruffling some feathers there. Like, I'm developing something that's going to be secure. They're like, yeah, prove it.
And eventually I managed to get them to agree that it was better than the nothing that we're currently providing. And so it went live, and it totally surprised me.
In a good way or a bad way?
In a good way,
Okay.
in a horribly successful sort of way, in the sense
Love
that I had been writing scientific software for my entire life, and my user communities were normally 12 smart people. I had never written anything in my entire career that was used by 1,000 people. And in the first year of this file transfer utility, it acquired 1,000 users.
Wow,
which
that's pretty cool.
It's very
I would
cool.
say so, yeah.
it was shocking to me because we were in a corporate environment of maybe 40,000 people in the entire company.
40,000 people. Good Lord. Gee.
And we were not obviously advertising this thing at all. And just by word of mouth, it propagated because I had written it in such a manner that you didn't have to set up any accounts and you didn't have to ask anyone's permission. And it required very little training, as in none, because I wasn't training anybody.
That's
I
true.
love it.
And people just used it. And so the first year was a surprise. The second year was a bigger surprise. It had a larger user community the second year.
And this was all under the umbrella,
in
the
a
corporate
corporate umbrella.
Right. Gotcha.
And
Okay.
but the real total gobsmacking surprise was its longevity, because I wrote it in like 1999.
Wait, back up. Okay, things got really interesting for me here right now. Okay, so I'm thinking this was like over COVID or something. I don't know. When people get ideas to build something. So this was 1999.
And when
Okay.
I retired from that company in 2018, it was still being used.
How many people?
Still had a user community of about 1,000 a year.
Okay. Yeah.
Varying users was part
Interesting.
of the interesting
Okay.
model of
Okay.
it. And the other thing was what we had seen on average about 3,200 transactions a month.
Okay.
So from a variety of different users.
So it goes to show that this is a technology that can be used across all different ways of using it.
Correct.
Depending on what kind of files you're shipping, how you're shipping them, and all that kind of fun stuff.
Correct. It was actually,
Yeah.
it was straight transfer of data from and to someone, knowing that it went to someone, but it was ad hoc.
Okay.
Some user would use it like January and March. Some user would use it February.
Some folks, they don't need to use stuff all. They're not always sending files.
Exactly.
Some people are heavy file users, so they're always shipping stuff. Some
Exactly.
people, like, it's 2 or 3 times a year, they got to use something.
And the engineers regularly used it because his vision, being an engineer, he enabled large files, like CAD files.
Yeah. Good stuff. Okay.
All right.
So 1999. I'm sorry. I just love hearing that. That's so cool.
I retired in 2018, and this thing was still in use. I was a little actually appalled because you write something, and if you look at something you wrote 20 years ago,
You're like, oh my, that was so 1999.
you
Exactly.
cringe a little.
It was like
bit.
neon purple and everything.
And I was surprised at its longevity. And when I was retiring, Angel asked me what I was going to do in my retirement. And I said, I have a much better design in my head, and I have had it for a decade. I think I'm going to write a modern version that addresses all of the deficiencies of my prior
and the complexities that have ensued since 1999 and the different ways things can be hacked now.
Things are a wee bit different.
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely.
And the other thing is, before he was retiring, or in conjunction with his retirement, our corporate environment was separating.
Okay.
Because that's a common thing that
I hear it. So the timing was interesting here. So you were finding maybe you'd have some time to help build and get this thing out in the world.
What I was finding is that I couldn't replace this solution, this custom solution.
Gotcha.
I could do variants of it. But the challenge that we were having in a direct replacement of it named users. So if you used it twice a year, you were a named user, and I had to get a subscription for you. So we had this challenge, and in the end, we ended up cloning it for the separated company because the market didn't have a solution comparable to this and as flexible as.
So you can pay as you go.
That's exactly right.
That's interesting because I know a lot of times you have to sign up for an account and it's like whatever it is, $30, $200 a year, whatever it is, but you're like, I only need to send this a couple times.
That's correct.
You may be afraid to use some of the other free solutions out there because sometimes free is what you get, it's what you pay for many times. Especially if they're very sensitive files, you don't want to risk. So you're right. So this allows you to do something very securely for a much better cost and with much more flexibility when you want to do it.
That's exactly right.
No commitments.
That's exactly right.
I love it.
And that Joe loves no commitments.
I can tell, yeah.
With his solution.
Very cool.
Yeah, to boil down what the current version does.
So how is this different from the 1999 version that was in use for almost 20 years?
We'll tell you what it does, and then I'll tell you the other one didn't.
Great.
This is a file transmission service that will allow you to transmit data of any size. And you can send or receive data to anyone that has an email address. And the attributes that I was looking for was that you can prove that the data only goes to the people you designate. You can prove that the data only went to the people you designate. You can prove that the data was transmitted or wasn't. You can prove that the correct data was transmitted. You can attach detailed personalized instruction on how to use the data. Very important in an engineering environment.
I would believe so. Absolutely.
all of your data and all of your metadata is accessible only to you and your correspondents, only the people to whom you intend to communicate.
Okay.
And that includes our service. So we do not possess any of your data and any of your metadata.
So no one can hack you to get to the stuff.
They can hack us, but they will not be able to obtain any of the data in transit, and they will not be able to attain any of the metadata. So they will not even be able to answer the question, what data is who is talking to whom via this service by hacking us? Obviously, we don't want to be hacked, and we take great pains in not to.
Absolutely.
Nobody wants to.
But in the event that they did hack us, they're not going to get any of our clients' data. And there's no client-side infrastructure. And
So it's just an app that, as you use it, it's using it over.
you're just using a web app.
Right.
No client. You don't have to install anything.
I don't get one of those fancy CD-ROMs I can like throw into my computer.
No.
Install it.
No dongles.
Right.
No
dongles.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, come on,
USBs,
man.
None of that.
Just a little touch of $19.99 to get one
And
with
the
this?
nice thing about that is because there's no client-side infrastructure, they scan for viruses and those kinds of things on your client. There's no maintenance because you don't have to patch, you don't have to do any updating or anything
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
Any
Keeps it
protection
simple.
against viruses.
I
That's
like it.
exactly right.
Yeah, interesting.
Simple is key.
And in keeping with its predecessor, there's no subscription, no accounts, no long-term relationship. Now, that was a real problem because in its prior life inside a corporate infrastructure, I didn't have to figure out how to charge people.
Yeah, you didn't need to.
Didn't
This is a
need
service
to-
that people were
yeah.
going to use anyhow, so that's
Yeah.
for sure. And also, you're in a more contained environment
Yes.
as well, too. You're behind a firewall at that point, so that makes
Exactly.
it adds a layer of security where you're not having to worry about certain things.
So now we needed to figure out a model that would maintain the idea that you don't have to have an account, but would also add the rather revolutionary idea of us getting paid somehow for the service.
It's always great to get paid, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, there are overhead
It's
costs.
a good way to live. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm all about it.
And we have achieved that through a kind of a novel funding structure. So you can use the service just to pay by the drink. So you can make a transmission and you can pay for that transmission. You pay for bandwidth. And very small parcels right now are free because we want people to try the
Sure.
system.
But if you have a big file, I guess as files get bigger, then the price goes up because the bandwidth.
Exactly.
Goes, right?
That's right.
Exactly. Because
Yeah. Exactly right.
bandwidth is what we pay for predominantly. And so up to a gig, you can send for $3. Up to a 5 gig, you can send for 5, and up to 20, you can send for 10. And that is a single transmission.
Gotcha.
And also, our gigabytes are measured as delivered to your recipients. But that would be inconvenient if you actually liked us and wanted to use us. But we didn't want to have accounts. So we don't want to know who you are because
Another
I
great
don't
point for
want to be
security.
able to
Yeah.
leak your
I love it.
name or any of your attributes. And so what we allow you to do is open a tab, like at the bar.
Oh, cool,
You can
man.
open up a tab.
I love it.
And you can tell us, put it on my tab, and we will deduct from that tab. And when you start to use up your tab, we will send you an email. And we have a flexible system that allows you to let other people drink on your tab.
I like it. Very cool. You can
And
send this
so-
file. I don't have a thing. Use my tab.
That's right.
And
Very
so
cool.
we believe that we should be able to handle the needs of individuals, small offices, and large organizations via this sort of flexible tab exercise, but nobody's identity needs to be exposed to us.
That's such a huge selling point. That's something I'd assume you're going to be leading with as you really start to grow this, because that is something that I think people are just so concerned about. And being able to not have that baggage, I think, is really important. And it could definitely be an advantage in the marketplace for you, because I can't think of any place else that's doing that. Everything that I think you need in account, even if you use like WeTransfer for free,
Right.
even if you don't use their public thing, first, you're limited to file sizes.
Right.
And secondly, there's something going on because nothing's free.
Right,
So
right.
I'm always like, but you're like, hey guys, if it's like a file that you're not really worried if somewhere to get it, like fine. But a lot of files people cannot see. And so being able
Right.
to have a system like this where you know that it can't be traced, it can't be hacked. So what I'm curious is, could there be potential nefarious use of this? Is that something to think about maybe? I don't.
There could be,
Yeah.
because I think that's humanity.
Right. I
Right.
always think about when someone has a really leading technology, can someone use it? I guess that's anything, obviously, but I'm
is.
just thinking like the idea that I can send something and there's really no one's
Yeah.
going to know who's going between it. I think that's great.
Yeah.
But that can mean something where people are like, hey, I don't know what people are doing out there. We all know the world's kind of weird, but I think
Yeah.
that's-
And the reality is, just like with everything, your data is your data.
for sure.
And what you do with it, it's your responsibility.
Of course.
And so if your data is not good data in certain ways, that
Yeah.
we can't control
Oh,
that.
of course.
or
Yeah,
anything.
absolutely.
So you're right. There could be, but that again is beyond our capability.
Yeah, I go back to the days when people were using like VPNs and stuff, and so you could like basically get like free subscriptions because you could always have a different VPN, so you could have those 3 magazine reads and then go back tomorrow and it sees a different IP address.
Yeah.
So you can go around and that's what human beings tend to do. But I digress. I'm just really stoked about the fact that this is something that you can open a tab with, for lack of a better term, and be
Yeah.
able to just use it very flexibly. So obviously it makes it very easy for like anyone to use, but if you're going to be using it in the corporate environment, do corporate IT teams need to verify that what you're saying is true before they're going to let their employees use it? Or can you sell at the corporate level and be like, hey, we want you to have a giant tab for your corporation maybe?
Yeah.
We would love it if corporations would use us, and we think that we are suitable for their use.
Okay.
Obviously, we're going to need to establish our credibility with
Of course.
them.
Yeah.
But we are certainly working on trying to generate the necessary credibility and sell into that environment. It is early days for us in customer identification. And we are working hard to figure out what it is that motivate people with money, because we would love to get some of it.
I love it. That's so great. I just find it interesting all the way around. Obviously, you're at this launch point now where you got this technology working. I love the fact that the initial concept of this was like 1999, for crying out loud, like 24 years ago, 25 years ago, 26 years ago.
Yeah, I
Oh,
know.
God.
It was funny because when I first met him, I said, man, why didn't I meet you a few years
Exactly.
ago?
Yeah.
And then as we continued to establish our relationship, although it was confrontational at times, because I was IT
You were the
and
IT,
he's
but yeah,
engineering,
he was
right?
pissing you off.
Yeah,
You're like,
he
wait a
was.
second, what's going on here?
And vice versa.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was inconvenienced.
I love it. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
And vocal.
And vocal,
Yeah.
yeah. But we're definitely going to put links here to your site if people want to try it out and see. They got to go check it out and send some files.
Yeah.
Just to see
And
how
we
it
really
works.
think we're a nice fit for like small or mid-sized companies
Totally.
because they can open a tab. And for example, accountants,
Yeah.
right? Because once a year they're really busy, or a couple times a year if they do tax extensions and
Surely.
things like that, for possible lawyers. So
Something
small-
where, it's
where-
something,
because it's tax information. If I'm going through a divorce, our relationship is established for that transaction, if you will, for that divorce
Right.
situation. And so you're going to want my tax papers and you're going to want some stuff. So a lawyer, it behooves them as well, because they can say, okay, send me your information, the sensitive information. The email stuff can continue to be email.
I'm glad you brought that up because I've seen some crazy stories where you've had lawyers and folks where they're transmitting accounts transmitting files unsecurely, and that's people's like their social security
Social
numbers are
security
in there.
numbers,
Like
that's right.
all the good stuff is in there, and that
That's
becomes
right.
so easily hacked. And hackers out there are looking for these types of companies sending stuff because they know that stuff's in there, right?
That's right.
And so your service eliminates all of that, which I think
Yes,
is
for
really
sensitive
interesting
data.
for sensitive data. So
Even
you're-
healthcare.
so I was going to ask you next. So do you need like a certain sort of HIPAA compliance for something like this?
We believe that we are HIPAA compliant,
Okay.
but we have not paid for certification. And again, it is early days, and our resources are limited.
Of course. I think it's great that you can start with some of these other industries. And then as things start to build, you could then get that actual HIPAA compliance. And I think that's just going to open up, obviously, all the more markets, because you think of the doctor's offices, healthcare systems, and so forth. It becomes a thing because, yeah,
Right.
the HIPAA stuff, that is serious business
And,
right
and
there.
again, it's very similar to what we just said. When you send your healthcare information, you're usually sending it maybe to a specialist because you have that issue, not because it's a chronic issue. It
Right.
could become a chronic issue, but then you're probably going into their charts and all of
Exactly.
that
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
stuff. But when you're still in the early stages of getting diagnosed
Right.
and things like that, and they need information, this is a great facility
Yeah.
to do that.
And I love the fact this is happening here in Pittsburgh, which is we get really excited about the
Yes.
Tech Council, because this is what makes
Yes.
Pittsburgh tick, is taking innovation like this and solving a real problem out there in the marketplace. That's
Right.
always the big thing. This isn't just something to do. It's like, this is actually solving a problem that's out there, which I think is just
Yeah.
fantastic.
The other area where when we have the conversation with people where they question it is they say, why wouldn't I use Dropbox? Or why wouldn't I use Google Drive?
Exactly.
Because of large files. You can do that, but the issue is, again, once you open up a drive or a folder or whatever, you do that, you have to remember you did that. And you have to remember that this person now has access to certain, then you have to do administration.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because this is no tear on Google. Maybe
Yeah.
it's just me because I'm an idiot. But every time, I'm serious, almost every time someone shares a Google Drive with me, I can never get into it the same way twice.
Oh, okay.
Okay, especially because many people have multiple Google accounts. Like I manage the Google account for the Tech Council, my own, and other things. And so every time I try to even get a folder, it'd be like, hey, you need permission for this folder. And then you got to tell the person, I need permission. It can be a nightmare when you're just trying to grab a file when it's just send me the freaking file. That's where I get sometimes. And I think Google Drive is great when you're storing stuff. But sometimes if you're just trying to share a file with somebody, I don't think it's the most efficient way to do it.
Google is a collaboration environment. So if
Exactly.
you have someone that you are going to communicate with on a
Obviously,
regular
right.
basis,
It makes sense, because once you get through the nightmare of getting the permission,
That's
then,
right. That's
then you're
exactly right.
good to go. So as a one-off thing, I can see where you're better than a Dropbox. Dropbox is even more frustrating. I won't even go down that road,
Yeah.
because this is a
Or
PG-13 podcast.
Yeah.
But there is something out there where it's like, yeah, the idea that you can just do this once and you don't have to create an account for it.
No.
You just go there, do it. It's secure. You guys have something
Especially
interesting
for
here.
movies, videos, CAD
Big
designs.
file, yeah,
It's
and
big files.
and you
'cause
look at the files that we're sending these days.
Right.
It's no
Some of
longer
them-
I have a 5 meg file I'm sending like in
Right.
1999.
Yeah.
No, I have a freaking terabyte file I got to get over
Right.
to you.
That's right. That's right.
we have never tested a terabyte.
Okay.
We have tested 100 gig,
Okay.
and it worked for 100 gig.
All right. Just, you know,
Took some time.
It takes a while.
multiply that by X and see what happens.
It takes a while. Theoretically, so the infrastructure that we are using theoretically has a limit at 4 terabytes.
4 terabytes.
But the real practical limit for
Yeah.
those sorts of transfers is the reliability and speed
course.
of your network connection.
Yeah. Of course, either network
And
connection starts to
it-
become the limiting factor. You're
Yeah.
trying to put a lot of stuff through a really teeny pipe at
Right.
that point.
But
Right.
I'm confident of its ability to operate in the 100 gig range because I've tested it.
Very cool.
And so talking a little bit more about the file sharing as an alternative to us, it is possible to securely send a file via file sharing, but it requires attention to detail, and it requires care. There are many errors that can be made when you use that infrastructure for doing a file transmission.
Okay.
And so those sorts of errors are things like forgetting to clean up the file after it's been transmitted.
Okay.
And so then you have an old file that's sitting out there that perhaps gets injected into your design process
Yeah.
months later
Huh.
and screws things up. I've seen
Right.
it happen.
Yeah, I never thought about that. Yeah, sometimes you're going back and actually, yeah, I could tell some horror stories on that. Yeah, keep going.
All right. There's a lot of metadata that has to go with the transmission. Lots of times you're sending somebody something that needs a bit of explaining. And if you're using a file sharing environment to do that, then all of that metadata has to happen in some back channel like email. And so there's an email that is associated with a file, And if that association is lost, like the person doesn't read their email,
That
then
never happens. Never happens. Jeez.
and that sort of thing is a source of error. And
Accidental data leaks with file
accidental
sharing.
data leaks by virtue of allowing someone access to a directory that either has someone else's data also in
Totally.
it,
Yeah.
or forgetting to rescind their rights and then granting someone else access to the same directory. There are a plethora of mistakes that can be made. If you're careful, you won't make any of those mistakes.
And I tell you what, whenever I'm sending a file, sometimes it's not when I'm rushing many times because it's like the end of the day, it's a thing. You're on a deadline to get the file out of here. So you're like, I'm going home now. So you're not always maybe crossing the T's and dotting those I's.
Our goal was to eliminate all of the errors that we could by structure. And actually, that's one of the reasons why, as a service, we don't want to know anything about you, because that eliminates a whole class of our errors. We can't drop your data because we don't have it.
I like that, man. Yeah, exactly. Sorry, we didn't do that.
But also we're trying to eliminate the user's errors. And so
Of course.
basically it's, since you have to explicitly name the people that you are sharing this data with, it is difficult to have an error where you inadvertently add someone that you didn't intend to because you had to actually explicitly put in who you were sharing it with. So our attempt here is to eliminate a lot of these errors, and because we turn file transmission into its own category of file transfer rather than trying to co-opt another piece of infrastructure like a shared disk to accomplish that, we can effectively eliminate those errors. One other point that, because I am an engineer and you don't get better from that, that I...
No recovery time on that?
No, sadly, it's a terminal condition.
It's a terminal condition.
I did want to point out that your data, your unencrypted data, never resides on the file system of any server ever. But we deliver unencrypted data to your correspondence. And I'm a wee bit proud of that little trick.
Very cool, man. I love it. What a great way to wind this thing up. There's so many things we've covered today that really have me going. First off, the flexibility, I think, is absolutely amazing. The bar tab connotation, I think, is fantastic. Just as you go, if someone else wants to use your tab, you can put on your tab and go. Makes it flexible, no commitments. The idea that you've like dummy-proof this, so it's really hard to screw up sending your file, which I think is massive because that's just bad. And the idea of how secure this is just tremendous. And you really explained to me today how you differ from some solutions. Someone would say, why not use Dropbox? Why not use Google Drive? We covered that. And it's like, you can use them, but they're a bit clumsier and not always as safe. So I think there's a lot of upside here for checking it out. So I want people to go check it out. Next time you send a file, use the service here and see how it works. Simple as that.
Now, the last thing that we didn't mention, and I wanted to close up, is that the data that you put in our environment has a lifespan.
Okay.
And so if you forget about it, you put the data's life up to 30 days.
Okay.
And if you forget about it or your recipient doesn't get it, it's gone after 30 days.
It disappears. So once again, no security risk of that being there and having someone find it.
That's correct, because, it's secure transmit. We really do try to make it so that your business is none of our business.
I love it, man. I'm glad you guys met decades ago when Joe was building this back in 1999. The fact that he comes out of retirement to make it for modern times, I think, is super cool. Guys, thanks for being part of TechVibe today. Really appreciate it. Good stuff.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Hey, in case you forgot, you want more stories like this about all the great companies here in Pittsburgh building really cool tech stuff, just keep following us here. This has been Jonathan Kirsting with the Pittsburgh Technology Council.